Janis Joplin, the voice that changed rock and roll. Settle in, close your eyes, and let me tell you a story about a girl who turned her loneliness into lightning. In the oil refinery town of Port Arthur, Texas, where the air clings thick with salt and smoke and the Gulf breeze carries both dreams and dust, a girl was born on January 19th, 1943. Her name was Janis Lyn Joplin. Before the world would hear her scream with soul and fury, before Monterey, before Woodstock, before she became the queen of rock and roll, Janis was a quiet girl who sang herself to sleep. Her mother, Dorothy, once scribbled a note on the back of a family photo. Janis sings herself to sleep. That was Janis. Music before words, feeling before form. Even then, in her small bedroom overlooking the industrial skyline, she was trying to turn her loneliness into something beautiful. Picture her there, a small figure curled beneath worn quilts, humming melodies that didn't exist yet, creating lullabies from the rhythm of her own heartbeat. The oil refinery lights twinkled like fallen stars beyond her window, and somewhere in that glow, a legend was learning to breathe. The seeds of song. The Joplin house on Proctor Street was neat, orderly, respectable. Her father, Seth, was an engineer at Texaco, a quiet man who solved problems with precision and patience. Her mother, Dorothy, taught business classes at Lamar College, where young women learned to type and file and keep their voices measured. But from the beginning, Janis was different. While other children played house or cowboys, she would sit at the old upright piano, picking out melodies by ear. Her stubby fingers found chords that shouldn't have worked, but somehow did. She was always making noise, her mother would later remember with a smile. Not bad noise, just different noise. The family attended the First Christian Church, where Janis joined the choir at age 7. The church was a red brick building with stained glass windows that painted rainbow patterns on Sunday mornings. But it was the music that drew her, the way voices could blend and soar, how a room full of people could become one sound, one breath. Her voice, even then, didn't quite fit in. It was too big for the hymns, too raw for the refined melodies. The choir director would gently suggest she sing more softly, but Janis didn't know how to be soft. Her voice was like her personality, all or nothing. At home, she discovered her father's old records tucked away in a closet. Hank Williams, Leadbelly, Bessie Smith. She would play them on the family's console stereo, dancing alone in the living room while her parents worked in the kitchen. These weren't the polite songs from church or the sweet pop tunes her classmates liked. These were songs that told the truth about heartbreak and hard times, about longing and loss. Late at night, when the house grew quiet and the refinery settled into its steady hum, Janis would lie in bed and sing herself to sleep with these melodies. Her voice would float through thin walls, mixing with the industrial symphony outside, a girl's dreams dancing with the working world's reality. The misfit years. Thomas Jefferson High School was a battlefield dressed up as education. Port Arthur in the 1950s had rules, unspoken but ironclad. Girls were expected to be pretty, quiet, and agreeable. Boys were expected to be strong, silent, and destined for the plant. Everyone had their place in the great machinery of small-town life. Janis never found her place. She walked the hallways like a question mark in a world of periods. While other girls teased their hair into perfect bouffants and painted their lips pink, Janis wore her dark hair loose and wild. She preferred men's shirts to dresses, boots to heels. She read books instead of fashion magazines, wrote poetry instead of love letters. The cruelty wasn't casual. It was coordinated. Pig and freak. The names followed her from class to class, a chorus of conformity trying to shame her into shape. But here's the thing about misfits. Sometimes they refuse to fit, not because they can't, but because they won't. They laughed me out of class, out of town, and out of the state, she would later say. But somehow, I always had a guitar. The guitar was a cheap acoustic her father bought her for Christmas when she was 15. It had steel strings that cut her fingers until calluses formed, a neck that felt too wide for her small hands, but when she wrapped her arms around it, something clicked into place. She learned to play by listening to records, rewinding the same song over and over until her fingers found the patterns. Leadbelly's Goodnight Irene, Odetta's folk ballads, and always, always the blues. She would sit in her bedroom or sneak into empty classrooms, playing and singing for an audience of dust motes and dreams. Her friend Grant Lyons, one of the kids who didn't seem to mind her differentness, introduced her to more music. He had a record collection that was like a library of American pain and joy. Ma Rainey, Billie Holiday, Big Mama Thornton. These were women who didn't apologize for taking up space, who turned their troubles into triumph. She showed me the air and taught me how to fill it. Janis said about Bessie Smith, "She's the reason I started singing, really." Those voices, the mothers of the blues, they didn't ask permission. They didn't smooth the edges. They bled and howled and roared, and they showed a lonely girl in Texas that there was power in being different, strength in being real. First Flight. In December 1962, Janis made her first recording. It was at a tiny studio in Beaumont, just a few songs for a local label that would never amount to much. The recording was raw, imperfect, honest, qualities that would define everything she ever did. Sitting in that cramped booth, wearing a borrowed dress and her best attempt at respectability, she opened her mouth and let loose. The engineer looked up in surprise. This wasn't the sweet folk singer he'd expected. This was something wilder, something untamed. The songs weren't trying to be pretty, neither was she. And in that moment, Janis discovered something crucial. She didn't want to be pretty. She wanted to be real. High school limped toward graduation like a wounded animal. While her classmates planned weddings and careers, Janis planned her escape. She'd been accepted to the University of Texas at Austin, not exactly the bright lights in Big City, but it was wider than Port Arthur, weirder, looser. Her graduation photo shows a young woman with serious eyes and a slight smile, as if she's already looking past the camera towards something the rest of us can't see. The inscription in her yearbook, written by classmates who never really knew her, was prophetic in its cruelty. Most likely to succeed at nothing. They were wrong, of course, but they were also right in a way. Janis would succeed at nothing. Nothing conventional, nothing expected, nothing safe. She would succeed at being completely, authentically herself, which in 1960s America was perhaps the most radical thing a woman could do. Austin Nights. The University of Texas at Austin in 1960 was a world away from Port Arthur.
The campus sprawled along the Colorado River, dotted with limestone buildings and live oak trees that had stood there longer than Texas had been a state. It was a place where ideas could breathe, where different was less dangerous. She studied art because what else do you study when your talent doesn't fit the categories? She painted abstract pieces that looked like her voice sounded. Bold strokes in unexpected colors, emotions too big for the canvas. Her professors didn't know what to make of her work, but they couldn't ignore it. More importantly, she discovered Threadgill's. Threadgill's was a gas station turned beer joint on the outskirts of town where country music and folk songs mixed with the smell of barbecue and the clink of long-necked bottles. Kenneth Threadgill had been singing since the 1930s, and he welcomed anyone who could carry a tune and wasn't afraid to try. Wednesday night.
Electric Awakening. Big Brother and the holding company was jamming in a warehouse in the Haight when Janis walked in for her first rehearsal. The band, Peter Albin on bass, Sam Andrew on guitar, Dave Getz on drums, and James Gurley on lead guitar, looked up as this small woman with wild hair and worn jeans entered their space. They'd heard she could sing, but San Francisco was full of people who thought they could sing. What they didn't expect was what happened when Janis opened her mouth. The first note that came out wasn't a note at all. It was a primal scream, a blues howl that seemed to tear through the fabric of reality itself. It was every lonely night in Port Arthur, every cruel word in high school, every moment of pain and beauty and longing wrapped up in pure sound. The music stopped. The room went silent. Then someone started banging on the wall from next door. Then someone else was pounding on the door. Within minutes, the police arrived, convinced that someone was being murdered in the warehouse. Peter Albin met them at the door, laughing nervously. No, it's okay. That's just Janis. What they didn't know yet was that this voice, this force of nature, was about to take them farther than they ever imagined. The band had been good before Janis arrived. Solid musicians playing the kind of experimental rot that was emerging from the San Francisco scene. But Janis didn't just sing with them, she transformed them. Her voice gave their music teeth, turned their experimental jams into something primal and powerful. They started playing the Fillmore, the Avalon Ballroom, all the venues where the new sound was being born. Audiences who came expecting typical psychedelic rock found themselves confronted with something unprecedented. A woman who sang like her life depended on it, because it did. "You can destroy your now by worrying about tomorrow," she once said. And on stage, she lived that philosophy completely. She emptied herself into every song, held nothing back, gave everything she had to the moment. The weight of being different. After Monterey, the world wanted to know everything about Janis Joplin. Who was this woman who sang like lightning and looked like no one they'd ever seen before? But fame, as Janis quickly learned, was a double-edged gift. The magazines wanted to photograph her, but they didn't know what to do with her wild hair and unconventional beauty. They'd ask her to pose like other singers, demure, pretty, safe. She'd laugh and shake her head. "Honey, I'm not trying to be pretty. I'm trying to be real." The music industry was built for men who played guitars and women who looked good holding microphones. Janis didn't fit either category. She commanded the stage like a man, but felt everything like a woman who'd been told her whole life she was too much. In interviews, reporters would ask her about her love life, her appearance, her clothes, rarely about her music. They wanted to understand how someone who looked like her could sound like that, as if power and beauty had only one acceptable form. But Janis had learned something important during those lonely years in Port Arthur. Being different wasn't a flaw to fix, it was a strength to embrace. She started wearing more colorful clothes, more jewelry, more of everything. Feathers and beads, velvet and silk. If the world was going to stare anyway, she'd give them something worth looking at. On stage, I make love to 25,000 people, then I go home alone. The loneliness followed her even to the heights of success. Hotel rooms in strange cities, surrounded by people who wanted something from her, she'd still find herself singing softly to herself before sleep. The same girl from Texas, just with a bigger audience for her dreams. Southern comfort and searching hearts. By 1968, Janis had become inseparable from her bottle of Southern comfort. It wasn't just a drink. It was liquid courage, a way to quiet the voice in her head that still whispered the cruel words from her childhood. She'd take the stage with the bottle in hand, taking swigs between songs like she was drinking from the fountain of her own power. The audience loved it. It was part of the show, part of the Janis mythology. But backstage, away from the lights and cheers, it was something else entirely. The whiskey helped her sleep in unfamiliar beds. It helped her forget the reviews that focused more on her appearance than her voice. It helped her navigate the music industry, a world of men in suits who saw her as both a commodity and an oddity. She searched for love in all the expected places, and some unexpected ones. Men who promised to understand her, women who shared her rebellious spirit, anyone who might see past the wild exterior to the tender heart beneath. I'd rather have 10 years of super hyper most than live to be 70 by sitting in some goddamn chair watching TV, she told a reporter. But late at night, when the parties ended and the crowds went home, she sometimes wondered if there might be a middle ground between burning bright and fading away. The bottle became her most reliable companion, never judging, never leaving, always there when the world felt too heavy or too light. It was a love affair that would define her as much as her music, though she never would have called it love. Love to Janis was supposed to heal you, not slowly destroy you. The search for home in music. Between the fame and the touring and the interviews, Janis was always searching for something that felt like home. Not the physical home in Port Arthur that had never quite fit, but a musical home, a place where her voice could rest and be understood. Big Brother had been family, but families sometimes outgrow each other. The band's loose, psychedelic style had been perfect for the early days, but Janis's voice was evolving, demanding more precision, more space to breathe and roar. She spent hours listening to records in her hotel rooms, not just blues and rock, but gospel, country, soul. Each genre offered something different. The raw emotion of Aretha Franklin, the storytelling of Hank Williams, the pure power of Big Mama Thornton. She was building a musical vocabulary that was entirely her own. I'm not a blues singer, I'm not a rock singer, I'm not a folk singer, I'm just a singer. But finding musicians who could match her intensity while giving her the freedom to explore was like searching for other members of her tribe. She needed players who understood that music wasn't just entertainment, it was survival, communication, a way of touching something sacred. The Cosmic Blues Band was her first attempt at creating this musical home. Horn sections and tighter arrangements, a sound that could contain her voice without constraining it. The critics were mixed, the fans divided, but Janis was learning, growing, refusing to be trapped in the image of who she'd been at Monterey. Every night on stage was an experiment. Some songs landed like lightning, others crashed and burned. But each performance taught her something new about her own power, her own limits, her own endless capacity for reinvention. She was still the girl who sang herself to sleep, but now she was learning to sing herself awake too, to face each new day with curiosity instead of just courage, to find in music not just escape, but transformation.
The fall and rise. By 1965, Janis was dissolving. The drugs, methamphetamine, heroin, Anything that would quiet the storm inside her head had taken control. Her once powerful voice was failing, her body was failing, her spirit was almost gone. Her friends in San Francisco watched in horror as she faded away. This vibrant, powerful woman who could command a room with a single note was becoming a ghost. They staged interventions, offered help, begged her to get clean. Finally, scared and sick, and barely recognizable as the girl who'd left Texas with such high hopes, Janis did something that took more courage than any stage performance. She went home. The return to Port Arthur was a retreat that felt like a defeat. Her parents, who'd watched their daughter's transformation with concern and confusion, welcomed her back with love and fear. She was gaunt, hollow-eyed, a shadow of the young woman who'd left to conquer the world. But sometimes we have to fall completely before we can rise. Janis enrolled in secretarial school, learned to type, tried to fit into the conventional life she'd spent years rejecting. She got clean, slowly and painfully, her body learning to exist without chemical support. She sang only in private now, humming to herself as she practiced shorthand and filing. For a while, it seemed like the dream was over. The girl who'd sung herself to sleep had gone quiet, accepting the ordinary life that Port Arthur had always expected of her. But dreams, real dreams, don't die easily. They just wait. The call back. In 1966, the phone rang in the Joplin house on Proctor Street. On the other end was Chet Helms, an old friend from the Austin music scene who'd made his way to San Francisco. He was managing a psychedelic rock band called Big Brother and the Holding Company, and they needed a singer. They needed her. "We're getting a chance to play the big festivals," he told her. "The music scene out here is exploding. Are you ready to come back?" Janis stood in her parents' kitchen, the phone pressed to her ear, and felt something stir in her chest, something that had been sleeping for months. The voice that had carried her this far wasn't gone. It had just been resting, gathering strength. She looked around at the neat, safe life she'd built in Port Arthur. The secretarial certificates on the wall, the regular schedule, the predictable routine. It was everything her parents had wanted for her, everything the town expected of her. It wasn't enough. "I'll be there," she said. Packing was easier this time. She'd learned to travel light, to carry only what mattered: the guitar, the records, the dreams that had survived everything: Texas, San Francisco, addiction, failure, and redemption. This time, though, she packed something else: wisdom. She knew now what the city could offer and what it could take away. She knew her own strength and her own weakness. Most importantly, she knew that the voice inside her, the one that sung her to sleep all those years ago, was worth fighting for.
For those who wish to follow the complete musical journey of our restless songbird, here lies the treasure map of her recorded legacy. Each album, a chapter in the story of a voice that refused to be contained. In the quiet hours after the concerts ended and the crowds dispersed, Janis would often sit alone with her records, studying them like ancient texts. Each album she made was more than just a collection of songs. It was a snapshot of her soul at a particular moment in time, a message in a bottle thrown into the vast ocean of human experience. Let us trace this musical journey together, following the breadcrumbs of her artistic evolution, from those first tentative recordings to the final triumphant statement that would outlive her by decades. The Early Whispers. 1962 to 1966. Before the world knew her name, Janis was already leaving traces of her voice in the universe. In December 1962, still a teenager carrying the wounds of Port Arthur's cruelty, she walked into a small studio in Beaumont, Texas, and recorded her first professional tracks. These weren't released during her lifetime. They lived in boxes and storage rooms, waiting decades to see the light. But listening to them now, you can hear it all beginning. The voice that would shake stadiums was already there, raw and untrained but undistinguishably powerful. She covered traditional folk songs like Turtle Blues and Black Mountain Blues, her voice carrying the weight of someone far older than her 19 years. During her Austin years, she made more recordings, informal sessions that captured her evolution from folk singer to something more dangerous. Her voice grows bolder with each session, less concerned with sounding proper and more focused on sounding true. In 1965, during her troubled first day in San Francisco, she cut 7 tracks for a small folk label called Mainstream Records. The songs, including Typewriter Talk and What Good Can Drinkin' Do, revealed an artist still searching for her identity. Her voice was strong but searching, like someone calling out in the darkness, hoping for an echo. These early recordings are like letters from a young woman to her future self, promises of the storm that was building in her chest, waiting for the right moment to break free. Big Brother and the Holding Company, 1967, The Lightning Learns to Dance. When Janis joined Big Brother and the Holding Company in 1966, something chemical happened. The band's loose, experimental style was the perfect container for her uncontainable voice. Their first album, simply titled Big Brother and the Holding Company, was released in August 1967, just 2 months after their earth-shaking performance at Monterey. It was recorded on a shoestring budget in Chicago. The album was rough around the edges, exactly as it should have been. The production was minimal, the arrangements loose, but Janis's voice cut through it all like a sword through silk. Songs like Bye Bye Baby and Women as Losers showcased her range, from tender vulnerability to primal scream, often within the same verse. The album wasn't a commercial success initially, but it established Janis as something unprecedented in popular music, a female vocalist who didn't just sing songs, but inhabited them completely, body and soul. Her cover of Big Mama Thornton's Ball and Chain was already becoming legendary, though the definitive version was still taking shape in live performances across San Francisco. Listening to this debut now is like discovering ancient cave paintings, primitive perhaps, but containing all the essential elements of something magnificent. You can hear Janis learning to work with other musicians, learning to be part of something larger than herself while never diminishing her own power. It was a document of a moment when everything was possible, when a group of misfits could plug in their instruments in a warehouse and create something that had never existed before. It was the sound of the summer of love, but with teeth. Cheap Thrills, 1968, The Storm Breaks. If the first Big Brother album was lightning gathering in the clouds, Cheap Thrills was the storm finally breaking over the world. Released in August 1968, it was everything the debut had promised and more, raw, honest, and absolutely uncompromising. The album went to #1 and stayed there, not because it was polished or radio-friendly, but because it was undeniably real. In an era when rock music was becoming increasingly sophisticated and produced, Cheap Thrills sounded like it was recorded in someone's garage by people who cared more about truth than technique. The opening track, combination of the two, announced Janis's presence like a battle cry. Her voice soared and dove, whispered and roared, often within the same line. It was a masterclass in emotional range delivered by someone who seemed incapable of holding anything back. But it was Piece of My Heart, written by Bert Burns and Jerry Ragavoy, that became her signature song during this period. Janis took what was originally a more conventional soul number and turned it into something primal and desperate. When she sang, Take It,
Take another little piece of my heart now, baby. You believed she was literally offering pieces of herself to anyone brave enough to accept them. The album's centerpiece was the 9-minute epic Ball and Chain, captured live at the Fillmore West. This wasn't just a song, it was a religious experience. Janis's voice climbed and fell like a bird caught in a hurricane, carrying the listener through every emotion human beings are capable of feeling. The guitar work was hypnotic, the rhythm section thunderous, but it was Janis's voice that made the song immortal. Summertime, her take on the Gershwin classic, showed a different side of her artistry. Slowed down to a crawl and drenched in blues feeling, it became a meditation on longing and loss. Her voice, usually so powerful it could shake buildings, became intimate and vulnerable, like she was singing directly into your ear. The album cover, featuring a cartoon drawing by R. Crumb instead of a photograph, was as unconventional as the music inside. It suggested that this wasn't just another rock album, it was art, outsider art created by people who didn't care about the rules. Cheap Thrills was recorded during a time of incredible creativity and equally incredible pressure. The band was dealing with sudden fame, record company expectations, and the knowledge that whatever they did next would be measured against their breakthrough at Monterey. That they managed to create something even better than their live reputation suggested was a testament to the power of the musical chemistry between Janis and Big Brother. Listening to Cheap Thrills today is like opening a time capsule from an era when rock music was still dangerous, when artists were willing to risk everything for the sake of emotional honesty. It remains one of the greatest rock albums ever recorded, not despite its roughness, but because of it. I Got Them Old Cosmic Blues Again, Mama, 1969, The Search for Something More. By 1968, Janis was feeling constrained by Big Brother's loose, jammy style. Her voice had grown more powerful and more precise, and she needed musicians who could match her evolution. The decision to leave Big Brother was heartbreaking. They had been her family, her support system, her partners in creating something revolutionary. But artists, true artists, must follow their vision even when it leads them into uncertain territory. The Cosmic Blues Band was Janis's attempt to create a more sophisticated sound. Still powerful, still bluesy, but with the precision of a horn section and the polish of professional session musicians. The resulting album, I Got Them Old Cosmic Blues Again, Mama, released in September 1969, was a bold artistic statement that divided critics and fans. The album opened with Try, Just a Little Bit Harder, a song that seemed to sum up Janis's entire philosophy of life and art. Her voice, backed by a full horn section, was more controlled than on previous recordings, but no less powerful. The arrangement was tighter, more focused, allowing every nuance of her vocal performance to shine through. Maybe the album's most tender moment showed Janis's growing sophistication as an interpreter of songs. Her voice, usually associated with power and intensity, became vulnerable and questioning. The lyrics spoke of uncertainty and hope in equal measure, themes that would become increasingly important in her work. The title track, Cosmic Blues, was perhaps the most personal song she had recorded to that point. It was her blues, not the traditional 12-bar format, but something entirely her own. The lyrics spoke of feeling like an outsider even in success, of searching for meaning in a world that seemed designed to disappoint. Her voice carried the weight of someone who had achieved everything she thought she wanted, but still felt empty. The album also featured Work Me Lord, a gospel-influenced number that allowed Janis to explore her spiritual side. Her voice soared over a churchy organ and testifying chorus, finding in music the kind of transcendence that had eluded her in traditional religion. Critics were mixed on the album, some finding it too polished, others praising its sophistication. Fans were similarly divided. Many missed the raw power of Big Brother, while others appreciated Janis's artistic growth. But perhaps the most important critic was Janis herself, and she knew the album was a necessary step in her evolution, even if it wasn't entirely successful. the Cosmic Blues Band toured extensively.